In this video, we will be focusing on the MWD reporting features within WellSeeker Pro. For the purposes of this video, we will assume a basic level of understanding of the WellSeeker database tree and how to access the reporting features. For those who are not familiar with these features, please refer to our WellSeeker Pro database tree overview training video. The first thing that we're going to look at is the inventory. The inventory is where, as an MWD engineer, you're going to make sure you have all the MWD tools on site documented. This is important as all the tools in the inventory will be available to select in the drill string editor when creating new BHAs, allowing the user to track tool usage. So within the inventory, in the type cell, we have the ability to select the type of tool. We have all the usual tools that you would expect on site, and further down the bottom of the list we have a lot more specific to the MWD side of things. For example, your pulsar, battery, directional module, all the way down here to MWD, RFD and shock absorber. It's very important that you select the correct type for each of your components because this will have an effect within the drill string editor. For example, when selecting from the inventory a battery, the program will only be able to see components within the inventory that are actually referenced as batteries. So the first thing to understand is it's very important to correctly select the type. The next thing to understand with regards to the type is that the MWD LWD type is very important because within the drill string, when we select this, this is the option that is going to have the most component properties that we will fill in as an MWD engineer. So as a general rule, the UBHOs that are entered will be selected specifically as MWD LWD, and we'll see more about this when we look at the drill string editor itself. As an MWD engineer, make sure all of your MWD components are in here, and if we scroll all the way along to the right hand side, we have some information regarding the drilling and circulating hours. Now the drilling and circulating hours for the well and the total drilling and circulating hours, these are calculated automatically based on your components being associated with the BHA and the BHA having been associated with a particular run within the program. The previous drilling and circulating hours, this is user definable. So if your tools arrive on site, if they've been transferred from another job and there are existing drilling and circulating hours already on a given tool, you can enter this value here and the total will be made up of the addition of the previous and the drilling and circulating hours on this particular well. If the tool has been serviced or if it's new, then leave this as 0 and it will stay with 0 hours to begin with. Once the tool inventory has been filled in appropriately, we would hit save, come out of it, and the next thing that we're going to take a look at is the drill string editor. So within the drill string editor, this is where the directional driller will usually create the BHA that's going to be run. As an MWD engineer, you would not be expected to fill this in terms of to create it originally, but the responsibility for filling in the information relating to the MLWD section would be your responsibility. So as we can see, within the drill string, we've got the bet, motor, drill collar, and then again we have this MWD LWD. Now there are several ways that this information can be filled in, but in order to track and associate this component with the component that we have in our inventory, we would right click on this line, and this will only work once MLWD has been selected. We would right click on this line and we select the option to insert from inventory. That will bring up any tools within our inventory that are selected as MWD LWD. If you do not see a component in here that you're expecting, it's probably because the type has been incorrectly selected in the inventory, and as a user you'll have to go back and make an adjustment. But in this particular instance, you can select the UBHO that you're planning to run in the whole, and you would select insert, and it will automatically fill in the description, ODID, weight, length, the serial number, and the connections, usually as a minimum based on what's entered within the inventory. You'll notice now that within the components properties section, there are a lot of additional options to fill in. It's worth noting that The component properties varies depending on the type of component that's been selected. So for example, a drill bit component is different from a motor, which is different from a drill collar, which is different from an MWD. That's why this is such an important component to have in the string, because no other component is going to give you all this information to fill in. So that is a very, very important thing. So the next thing to do as an MWD engineer will be to fill in as much of this information as possible. There is no requirement to fill in a minimum amount. The more information you've got in here, the better. But if you don't fill any of this information in, the program will still run. It will still do what it needs to do. You just won't be tracking all the information that you could be. So we've got things like pressure drops, stabilizers. If your MWD has a stabilizer, you can specify the OD, blade width, length, distance. We've got some offset values, make and model. These will come from the inventory itself. Fishneck sizes and lengths, MWD type, pulsar type. When we come down to the serial number section, if you have any of these components in the inventory, there will be a drop-down menu available here, giving you the ability to select the serial numbers of those components as you have them in the inventory. If you don't have something in the inventory, for example, I don't have an EM probe serial number in the inventory. In this situation, there is no drop-down available for me, and I can just type anything that I want in here, and I can do it manually. But if I had this component or several of these components in the inventory, they would be available for me from the drop-down menu. So again, expect for the serial number section to see the drop-downs. If you don't see a drop-down and you know that the component's in there, you've probably got it mislabeled within the inventory, and it's something that you should go back and check. Coming down here, further down, we've got our offsets for the various surveys, gamma, PWD, resistivity, etc. And then we've got some more information, directional version, gamma version, orifice type, EM power frequency, right down to battery plug-in dates and times and out date and time. So again, this information can be filled in for everything that you have. Every BHA that we enter in the program will also have a performance report associated with it. If we open up the performance report for this given BHA, we can see that there are a few different pieces of information in here, and some of these specifically relate to the MWD. And in this case, it's this section at the top in the middle. We can see that we've got some information that's greyed out, so your MWD plug-in dates and times, these are all have already been filled in under the MWD components section. The rest of these options here are available for us to adjust as required. So we've got some test options in here that we can select as pass or failed. We've got our engineers details that we can put in, non-mag above and below, minimum maximum temperatures, survey frequency, tool phase sequence, and then over on the right hand side we have got some more serial number options. Now again, if you have these particular components selected within the inventory, they will be available from this drop down menus. If you don't have them in, then you can manually type the values in. We go further down, we've got some EDR data, transducer types, all the way down to crossover angle, DD verification, backup receiver serial number, etc. So prior to the run starting, as an MWD engineer, you would come in and you would make sure that this information was filled in as well. Once you have filled the BHA in prior to the run starting, that is everything that needs to be done. Once the run has been complete, we will have to come back in here, and there are a couple of things that are related to the MWD reporting that we will need to look at. But we will look at those in a second. The only other thing that you would need to do from within the drill string prior to the run starting is in the edit menu, there is an option for MWD probe order, and within here you can specify which tools are included in the string, and you can adjust the probe order by selecting on the line and selecting move up or down. This information will be included in the MWD report, So once this has been set up for this assembly, you don't need to do anything else. Once this has been completed and the job starts to run, the MWD engineer will not need to do anything else within the program, with the exception of, for each daily report, there is an MWD Comments section. Now, if there is a specific comment relating to the MWD on a daily basis, that can be entered in here on each of the reports. If there is nothing specific to report, then you don't need to put anything else in at all. And when the daily report is printed off and sent in every day by the directional driller, you will see any specific MWD comments that you have on there. Once the job has been completed and the BHA has been pulled out of hole and it has been laid down, then the MWD engineer can come back into the drill string editor, and there are a couple of things that you would need to do in order to finalise everything for your report. So again, we would come back to our MWD component and we would come down, and there are some options in here. For example, the battery plug out date and time. That would be specific that you would need to fill in. Nothing else really in this section. You would then come to the performance report. Now within the performance report, again, there may be some slight adjustments need to be made, but the main thing is the MWD comments. So from a BHA perspective, the additional comments is where the directional driller is going to specify any points they have relating to the run, and this is where, as an MWD engineer, you would specify your comments as well. The other thing that is very important within here is the reason why it was pulled out of hole. Now, in most cases, the MWD engineer won't need to worry about this, but if there has been some sort of failure that is related to the MWD, then it is very important that this is selected within here. And when that is selected, you'll notice that all of these greyed out cells now become available to fill in. So when you select this, it checks this failed box at the top as well. And the MWD specifically can start to put in some specific MWD failure information. This can also be detailed with shop findings once this is going back to the shop, along with operations at the time of failure, troubleshooting performed, and surface findings. Up in the top right hand side, we also have some more information from a failure perspective, and you can specify if it was a trip for failure, surface failure, and from this drop down we can also specify what MWD tool it was that failed. Again, the options available here are going to be based on the options that you have entered where the serial numbers are required. Anything that you've got in there will then be available for you to select from here. Once this has all been filled in and you are happy, then you are able to print off your report, and those are printed off from the performance report dialog itself by selecting the file menu, and we have got MWD Performance Report Excel and an MWD Performance Report as a PDF. So if we just print one of these off, here we have an example where we've got our job information, we've got some specific run data, so all of this information regarding the total drilled, percentages of sliding, rotating, slide rotate hours, these are all taken care of automatically. The directional driller will have made sure all these numbers are as required. And then some more specific MWD information here, sensor offsets, BHA details, more MWD info, MWD tool orders. We've got our magnetics. Again, the magnetics will be associated with the actual well, so these are not something that you need to worry about. And then any comments that you've made. And as I mentioned, these are available to print off in both Excel and in PDF. There's also an MWD failure report, so if there was any failures, MWD specific failures, and more data was entered in here, the user can print off an MWD failure report. This now concludes our video on MWD reporting.